بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وخاتم النبيين الحبيب المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وصحابته الكرام المنتجبين. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, may all the peace and blessings be upon all the prophets, especially the greater prophet of Islam, and upon his purified progeny and the believers of his companions. And may the peace and blessings be upon all of you, dear brothers and sisters and friends who made time to join us tonight. It's so good to get to see you again. I pray and hope that you continue to do well and you are healthy, inshallah, and safe. We continue with Qur'an study, chapter 25, Surah al-Furqan. Today we will study verse number 2. I think we won't have time to study more than one verse because of the detailed information and things that we need to study in this verse. So I will read the Arabic, and this time Hajj Rida will read the English after me. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض ولم يتخذ ولدا ولم يكن له شريك في الملك وخلق كل شيء فقدره تقديرا.
He to who belongs the sovereignty of the heavens and the earth. He has not begotten a son, nor has a partner in the kingdom. He has created everything and ordered it in due proportions.
So please remember the first verse in chapter al-Furqan, where it says in the translation in English, or first in Arabic, Tabarak, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Tabarak alladhi nazzala al-Furqan. Hallowed is the one who sent down the Qur'an. Who is he? Of course, is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. God is the one who sent down the Qur'an. So this verse continues with talking about the attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In this verse, all attributes of Allah are important. 5 attributes of God are presented in this verse, and inshallah we'll talk about these 5 attributes within the next 30 or so minutes. So it says, الذي له ملك السماوات والأرض. He to whom belongs the sovereignty, power, and the dominion of the universe and the earth. To God alone belongs the authority over the whole universe. So this is one of the attributes of God, that He owns the sovereignty and the authority of the whole universe. Now, humans and companies or governments, they may have authority, a very limited authority and ownership of things. Very limited and very temporary. Humans and governments, they lose their ownership and power and authority for a variety of things. After a while, they could sell their property. They may die, perish. So the ownership of their property and their authority goes on to other people. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His sovereignty and authority over the whole universe, not over limited things, over the whole universe, earth and beyond the earth, is absolute, is permanent, eternal, and it's over everything. Everything in this world is under the ownership of God's authority. So this is one of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second attribute mentioned in this verse, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ I'm sorry. Yes. Let me read from the Qur'an. وَلَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا Sorry. وَلَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا He has not begotten a son. So this is a very significant attributes for God within the faith of Islam. In our faith, in the tradition of Islam, one major principle is that God was not born, He was not begotten, and He begets not. So that's one of His attributes. The reproducing for God does not apply to God. There is an association, brothers and sisters and friends, a very close association between mortality and also reproducing. That I would like to explain why God does not beget a son, or He was not begotten. Because there is a relationship between mortality and reproducing. God has given this ability of reproducing to His creatures, like humans, like animals, trees, maybe other creatures that we are not aware, maybe to the stars. We know there are stars born every day and stars who die every day. So God has given this ability of reproducing to some of His creatures. Why? We ask why God has given this ability to some of the creatures. The reason is so the creation continues. Life would continues. Imagine if, just imagine if there is no death for humans, for example. Just let's take this condition, this example. No death, and humans become immortal, or they were immortal. Imagine, since the beginning of the creation of humans on earth, nobody has died. What would happen? Imagine for a second what would happen. Life would be very difficult, extremely difficult, not possible to be sustained. And it will reach a point that some of humans would say they would beg for death, because it would have a lot of pain and suffering. Imagine throughout these millions of years or thousands of years, nobody of humans die. It would be extremely difficult for life on earth. So God has created this death and reproducing to maintain a balance in life and in the creation. People are born, animals are born, trees are born. They live a life, for a short or a long period. Could be less than a second, could be billions of years, something a star or a planet would live. But eventually they die or they perish. So this is a characteristics of the creation for the purpose of continuation of life and the creation. Things and humans are born and they die later. But for God, God does not die. God lives forever. He is eternal. So reproducing means nothing. It doesn't. There is no point of reproducing for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No point for Him to have a son because he lives forever. So this is one point. The second point here, this sentence, this very short sentence, وَلَمْ يَتَّخِذْ وَلَدًا, he has not chosen a son. If we want to translate it literally, he has not chosen a son. Or if we can translate it in a general meaning, that he does not beget a son. And the other point that we learn from this sentence is that typically those who reproduce, they reproduce of their own kind, similar kind. Humans reproduce humans. Animals reproduce animals. Trees reproduce trees. If this concept were to be valid to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to God, he would reproduce another God. And then there will become the conflict, the violation of the principle of unity, of oneness of God. The principle of monotheism in our faith and other faiths, because God would reproduce, would beget another God, and then we will have multiple gods, and this will be in violation of the pillar, the first pillar in Islam, which is believing in one God and only one God. So this is the second thing we learn from this verse. The third thing that we learn, and I would like to refer to it, is then what is the relationship between the man and God and his Lord? Because some would say the concept of godchildren is not a physical one. It could be referring to that humans and other creation are God's creation. He cares about them. So it's not it could be a spiritual sense, not a physical sense. In this case, I believe many Muslim scholars agree with this concept, because there is a hadith, a narration from the Prophet ﷺ that says, Al-Khalqu kulluhum ayalullah. The whole creation is dependent on God. Ayalullah. Or the whole creation is family for God in another sense. أحبهم إليه أنفعهم إلى عياله. The most beloved one among people, for example, are those who are more useful to the family of God. So ayal here, those who depend on others, in this sense that all the creation belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He cares about them. All humans, in this sense, it could mean something, but definitely not in a physical meaning. So this is the second attribute of God in this verse. The first one was that to him belongs the sovereignty of everything in this universe. The second is that he has not chosen and will not choose a son for himself. And then the third, it says, وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ شَرِيكٌ فِي الْمُلْكِ. He does not have a partner in his authority. Remember about the sovereignty and authority that I talked about in the beginning of this verse. Everything belongs to God. Now the third attribute of God in this chapter is that he is alone in his authority. He owns this absolute sovereignty and authority, and no one shares with him. No one is his partner in this sovereignty and authority over the universe. Because the idol worshippers, when Islam was born, they thought the idols are partners with God and they might share some of his power. So Islam came to say there is no partner for God. God is the absolute owner and the absolute authority over this universe. Now, and again, in some of the idol worshippers would believe that there is a supreme God beyond those idols. But those idols are partners, are means for them to reach God. Again, the Qur'an would say this idea is a wrong idea. It has no base. No base in religion and no base in intellect. And then comes the fourth attribute of God, which it says, وَخَلَقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ. He has created everything. So in our faith, we believe that everything was created. It did not happen by itself. It was created for a purpose. And who is the creator? The creator is God. He created everything in this universe, not only on earth, not only the life on earth, but everything in this universe was created by God. Somebody might ask a question, or maybe two questions. One, somebody might say, what about the theory of the origin of a species and evolution? We've learned this at the schools in biology, long time ago. Somebody might say, what about this theory that species developed and evolved to reach something like a human? To answer this question is that I really do not know whether Darwin, who actually, he did not, by the way, Darwin was not the first one to say about the theory of evolution. He actually put it in one theory. There were other scholars who mentioned that before, and believe it or not, some of them long time ago, Muslims, such as Ibn Khaldun. Ibn Khaldun, the Muslim historian from North Africa, 500 or 600 years ago, he pointed out in his book that there is a relationship between the chains of life of a species from a very simple one to a very advanced one. However, Darwin made a research and he presented. My question is, when Darwin presented this theory, did he really meant that there is no designer for such evolution on Earth? Is it happening by itself without a designer, or there is a designer? I don't know. I at this moment I really do not know. If this theory to be a true one, and basically up to now it does not contradict our faith or the Quran. However, if it assumes that this evolution is happening by itself with no designer, with no authority, then obviously this conflicts the tenet and the principles of the Quran and our faith. So we leave this for another time to discuss about that. The second question people might ask, we're talking about the fact that God has created everything. So in our faith, we believe everything was created and is being created, and the creator is God. The second question is about what about things that humans create? Cars, homes, you name it, shirts, microphones, phones, things like that. The answer is that even those are created by God indirectly. First of all, what is significant about God's creation is that He creates out of nothing. Nothing. Humans create out of materials available for them. Possibly we better call it manufacturing. So there are materials, elements available for humans. Out of these materials, they make a car, an airplane, a shirt, a home, so on and so forth. But God creates out of nothing. Right now, as I'm talking to you, based on what physicist has mentioned, the universe is expanding. Expanding in where? Out of nothing. The universe is expanding out of nothing. You and I might not understand how this is happening, but this is what they say. The universe is expanding. The space is becoming larger from no space. I don't know how this is possible, but this is what the Qur'an said, and this is what a lot of scientists also say. And the second thing is that who created the humans? God created them. So basically, even things that were created by humans were created by God. And now we move to the fifth attribute of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this chapter, which says فَقَدَّرَهُ تَقْدِيرًا. He has given everything He created the due measures or the due proportion. This is very important, brothers and sisters. A lot of humans, they talk about the creation. Who created God? But in this verse, it talks not only about the creation, about what happens after the creation. Let me give you an example. If somebody creates something that has no use for humans, this would be insignificant, no use. Nobody will use it and they throw it away. Just imagine a car that is taken to a place that has no roads, no gas, no water, no air. What do you do with this car there? It becomes useless. But if you manufacture something that kind of provide benefits and use for others to use it and benefit out of it, that is what is important. This verse is exactly talking about this, that not only God created everything in this universe, but actually God put it in a position to be in harmony with billions and billions of other things that God has created, to work with a very sophisticated and a vast network that we call the creation. God has created everything and put it in its position so it can work in harmony with billions of other things in this creation. This is really, if it is not more important than the creation itself, is not less important than the creation. It has an equally important aspect in that. Let me give you an example. Oxygen, one of the billions and billions things that God has created. Oxygen is available in the air, in our bodies, in many other bodies, in water, in many things that you and I may know or may not know about it. The amount of oxygen on earth, in the air and in the bodies and the water is a certain amount. There are things and humans who consume oxygen, and that there are things who their job to produce oxygen. So God has, since we need oxygen to live, since life on earth needs oxygen, God has given earth a certain amount of oxygen, and God made it in a way that those who consume and those who produce create a balance about the oxygen, so oxygen will stay in the same level or in about the same amount all the time. Imagine oxygen would become too much. It will turn into a problem. Maybe fires will start all the time. If oxygen becomes very less, it turns to be also a problem. God has created this miqdar, this measure for the oxygen, and put it in a balance to be beneficial for everyone. This is just one example of billions and billions of other examples how God would create something. So it's not only about the creation, but also gives it a due measure, a due amount in variety of dimensions, not in the quantity alone, but also in time, not only in space and in quantity, and also in time. People have and things have a certain life and age. After that, they die or they perish. And this is part of the balance. Remember, this is part of the balance to keep the creation continuous the way God would want it to continue. So everything in this universe, brothers and sisters, is created in a balanced way. God has not only created them, but also gave them a role, gave them a due measure, a due time to fulfill their role and responsibility. And when it is time that God decides on, or He already decides on, this could stop. This is why even some scholars today, they say, okay, look at this COVID-19. This COVID-19 could be directly or indirectly as a work of God. For what? To maintain the balance on earth. Remember, brothers and sisters, just a few months ago, there was a huge, just an example, a huge fire in Australia. Today, as I was searching, it said a staggering of 1 billion species of animal, 1 billion animal died burning in that fire. 1 billion, not 1 million, 1 billion animal died in that fire a few months ago. That it was in Australia. If you remember, again, another fire was in the Amazon, in the rainforest of Amazon. Another 2 to 3 millions of animals died there. 2.5 millions of acres were burned there. And they say that the Amazon is the lung of the earth. Now, this is due to the unfortunately man-made unbalance in our environment, the global warming. These are all thoughts I'm sharing. It could be right, it could be wrong. This COVID-19 made every human, almost all the humans in every nation and country, to stay home for at least 2 months or 3 months. Many still are at home. Many of these emission gases has dropped significantly. Now you can see the skies and the mountains very clearly. Could be that this is a work of God directly or indirectly to maintain the balance on earth. This is just an example, of brothers and sisters. So we go back to the verse. God has created everything. This is another attribute of him, and he has given for everything in this universe a role and a due measure in time and space to fulfill their role, and that they may die or they may perish. By this we come to the end of today Qur'an study. Inshallah, we'll continue our Qur'an study next week. I'll see you then. I'll wait for you if you have any question or a comment that you would like to raise to answer or to hear your comment. If not, we will conclude with a short prayers, inshallah. All right, doesn't seem that we have any question or comment here. I'd like to recite Surah al-Fatiha to end with reciting the opening chapter of the Qur'an for the healing of those who are ill and sick, and for the comfort of those who are going through hardship these days, and for the blessings of the soul of those who departed, and also for the answering of our prayers and your prayers, inshallah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.